I was standing in my own living room, holding a letter from my late sister's attorney, when I heard my son's wife say through the kitchen door, "All we have to do is get her to sign the power of attorney. She is old enough that no judge will question it." My son laughed quietly and said, "She has no idea how much it is worth. By the time she figures it out, the money will already be in our account." My hands went cold. The letter in my fingers said $3.8 million, and suddenly I understood why my son and his wife had moved back home 3 weeks ago to take care of me. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Margaret. I am 63 years old. I spent 37 years teaching 4th grade at Ridgemont Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina. I retired 2 years ago with a small pension, a paid-off house, and a garden that keeps me busy. I never had much money, but I never needed much either. My husband, Frank, passed away 6 years ago from a heart attack. He was a good man, a quiet man. He drove a delivery truck for 29 years and never once complained about it. After he died, I learned to live alone. It was not easy, but I managed. I have one son. His name is Kevin. He is 38 years old. He married a woman named Diane 4 years ago. Diane is smart, well-spoken, and always dressed like she is about to walk into a board meeting. Kevin works in insurance sales, but he has never been very good at it. Diane works in real estate, or at least she used to. I found out later that she had not sold a house in over a year. 3 weeks before I heard that conversation, Kevin called me on a Sunday night. His voice sounded tired. "Mum," he said, "Diane and I have been talking. We are worried about you living alone. What if something happens? What if you fall?" I told him I was fine. I told him I had been walking 2 miles every morning and that my neighbor, Clara, checked on me regularly. But Kevin kept pushing. "We want to move in for a while, just to help out. Diane can work from home, and I can handle things around the house." I should have said no. But he is my son, and a part of me, the part that had been lonely since Frank died, wanted to believe he was coming home because he cared. They arrived on a Wednesday with 3 suitcases and a dog I had never seen before. Diane walked through my house like she was appraising it. She touched the curtains and said, "We should update these." She looked at the kitchen cabinets and said, "These are original, right? That is actually charming." I smiled politely because that is what mothers do. The first week was fine. Kevin mowed the lawn. Diane organized the pantry without asking. The dog chewed up one of my garden gloves, but I did not say anything. They seemed comfortable, maybe too comfortable. Kevin stopped mentioning going back to their apartment in Charlotte. Diane started rearranging the guest room like it was permanent. Then, on a Thursday morning, I received a certified letter from a law office in Raleigh. My older sister, Helen, had passed away 4 months earlier. We had not spoken in 11 years. It was a long, painful story involving an argument that neither of us knew how to end. Helen never married. She never had children. She worked as a petroleum engineer for 31 years, and apparently she had been far wealthier than anyone in our family ever knew. The letter said she had left me her entire estate, $3.8 million in investments, a small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and a storage unit in Durham that I had no idea existed. I sat down on the edge of my bed and read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from grief. Helen had remembered me. After 11 years of silence, she had still put my name in her will. I cried for 20 minutes before I could even stand up. I walked out to the kitchen to make coffee, and that is when I made my first mistake. I left the letter on my bedside table. I did not think anyone would go into my room, but when I came back an hour later to get dressed, I noticed the letter had been moved. It was on the left side of the table when I left it. Now it was on the right. Someone had read it. That afternoon, Diane suddenly became very interested in me. She made me lunch without being asked. She brought me iced tea while I worked in the garden. She sat beside me on the porch and said, "Margaret, you have done so much for everyone your whole life. You deserve to enjoy yourself." It felt rehearsed, like a commercial. That evening, Kevin suggested we all go out to dinner. He picked a restaurant we could not normally afford. He ordered wine. He raised his glass and said, "To family." Diane squeezed my hand under the table. Something felt wrong, but I could not name it yet. The next morning, I went for my walk as usual. I came back earlier than expected because it started raining. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside quietly, and that is when I heard them in the kitchen. Diane's voice was clear. All we have to do is get her to sign the power of attorney. She is old enough that no judge will question it. Kevin said, "She has no idea how much it is worth. By the time she figures it out, the money will already be in our account." Diane continued, "I already talked to Greg. He can set up the LLC by next week. We transfer the inheritance into the company, list ourselves as managing partners, and she will never be able to touch it." Kevin said, "What if she asks questions?" Diane laughed softly. "She is a retired school teacher, Kevin. She does not understand LLCs and trusts. We just tell her we are protecting her money from taxes." Then Kevin said something that cut deeper than anything. "Honestly, she should be grateful. She would just waste it on that garden and church donations anyway." I stood there in the hallway, dripping rain onto the hardwood floor. I was not shaking. I was not crying. I was perfectly still, and something inside me turned to steel. They thought I was a simple old woman. They thought because I taught children and grew tomatoes and went to church on Sundays, I could not possibly understand money. They moved into my house to manage me. Not to help me. To manage me. I turned around, walked back outside into the rain, and sat in my car for 10 minutes. I called the one person I trusted completely. My neighbor, Clara. She is 71, a retired family attorney, and the sharpest person I have ever known. "Clara," I said calmly, "I need your help." She heard the tone in my voice and said, "Come over, right now." I told Clara everything. Every word I heard. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward and said, "Margaret, what they are describing is financial elder abuse. If they get you to sign a power of attorney under false pretenses and move your inheritance into an LLC they control, that is fraud." The word fraud made my stomach twist. "My own son," Clara continued. "Do not sign anything. Do not tell them what you heard. And first thing tomorrow, we are calling my colleague at the district attorney's office." That night, I walked back into my house like nothing had happened. I smiled at Kevin. I thanked Diane for cooking dinner. I sat at the table with them and ate pot roast while they talked about plans for the weekend. Every word they said sounded different now. Every kindness felt calculated. After dinner, Diane pulled out a folder. "Margaret, I have been thinking. It might be a good idea to set up some legal protections for you, just in case anything happens. A power of attorney, a healthcare directive, the usual stuff." She slid a document across the table. I picked it up and pretended to read it slowly. It was exactly what I expected. A durable power of attorney naming Kevin as my sole representative with full authority over all financial decisions. Diane had already filled in the blanks. I looked up at her. "This is very thoughtful," I said sweetly. "Can I have a few days to read it carefully?" A flicker of impatience crossed Diane's face, but she covered it quickly with a smile. "Of course. Take your time," Kevin added. "No rush, Mom. We just want to make sure you are protected." Protected. That word tasted like rust. The next morning, I went to Clara's house at 7 o'clock. Her colleague, a woman named Judith Hayes, met us there. Judith specialized in elder law and financial abuse cases. I showed her the power of attorney document. She read it in silence, then looked up at me. "This is aggressive," she said. "If you had signed this, they would have had complete control of your finances, your property, everything. You would have needed a court order to get your own money back." I felt sick, but I kept my composure. "What do I do now?" Judith laid out a plan. "First, contact the attorney handling Helen's estate and ensure the inheritance was placed directly into a trust with my name only. Second, document everything, every conversation, every interaction. Third, do not confront them yet. Let them reveal the full scope of what they were planning. This is hard advice to follow," Judith warned me. "But if you confront them too early, they will cover their tracks." So I went home and played my part. I smiled. I cooked. I watered my garden. And every night, I wrote down everything they said and did in a small notebook I kept hidden inside a hollowed-out book on my shelf. Frank's old copy of The Old Man and the Sea. He would have appreciated the irony. 4 days later, Diane escalated. She came to me with a second document. This one was more sophisticated. It was an agreement to transfer my inheritance into something called Blue Ridge Family Holdings LLC. The document described it as a family wealth preservation vehicle. I read every word carefully this time. My name appeared nowhere as an owner or partner. Kevin and Diane were listed as sole managing members. Who prepared this? I asked calmly. Greg, my friend from real estate, Diane said casually. He does this kind of thing all the time. And my money would go into this company? It is not really going anywhere, Diane said quickly. It is just being reorganized for tax purposes. You will still have access. I looked at the signature line at the bottom. Let me think about it this weekend. Diane's jaw tightened. Margaret, the estate attorney needs a response soon. If we do not act quickly, there could be tax penalties. That was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I had already spoken with Helen's estate attorney. There were no tax penalties. The estate was handled cleanly. Diane was creating urgency to pressure me into signing. I smiled gently. I appreciate you looking out for me, Diane, but I am not going to rush. She stared at me for a moment. Then she smiled back. Of course, you are right. That evening, I heard Kevin and Diane arguing in the guest room. Diane's voice was sharp. She is stalling. She is smarter than you said, Kevin whispered harshly. Just give her time. She trusts me. We do not have time, Kevin. Greg says if we do not move the money within 2 weeks, the whole structure falls apart. What do you want me to do? There was a long pause. Then Diane said something that chilled me. We may need to talk to Dr. Kessler. I did not know who Dr. Kessler was, but the way Diane said the name made my skin crawl. The next morning, I told Clara about Dr. Kessler. Clara's face went pale. Margaret, in elder abuse cases, sometimes the family tries to get a doctor to sign a cognitive assessment declaring the person incompetent. If they do that, they can petition a court for guardianship. Guardianship. That meant they could take everything. My money, my house, my freedom, all by convincing a judge that I could not think clearly. I felt a wave of fear, but it passed quickly, because I had been preparing for this. That afternoon, I went to my own doctor, Dr. Emerson, who had treated me for 15 years. I told her what was happening. I asked her to conduct a full cognitive evaluation on the record. She ran every test: memory, reasoning, awareness, comprehension. She sat across from me when the results came back and said, Margaret, your cognitive function is excellent, above average for your age group. Actually, she documented everything and gave me a sealed copy of the report. Then I went to the bank. I spoke with the branch manager and told her no one other than me should have access to any account with my name on it. No exceptions, no family overrides. She flagged my accounts and added an extra verification layer. Then I met Judith again. She had done some research on Greg, Diane's friend. It turned out Greg had been involved in 2 previous cases where elderly clients had been moved into LLCs that drained their assets. One case resulted in a settlement. The other was still under investigation. This is not their first time, Judith said quietly. Your daughter-in-law may have done this before. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Not because of Diane. Because of Kevin. My son had married someone who targeted vulnerable people, and he was helping her. The following Tuesday, Diane brought a man to the house without telling me. He was tall, wore a grey suit, and introduced himself as Dr. Kessler. He said Kevin had asked him to stop by for a friendly conversation. Just a chat, he said. Nothing formal, but I recognized what this was. A pre-assessment. A fishing trip to see if they could build a case that I was confused or declining. I invited him to sit down. I offered him coffee, and for the next 45 minutes, I discussed the current school funding crisis in North Carolina, the differences between revocable and irrevocable trusts, the novels I had been reading that month, and the chemical composition of the fertilizer I used on my rose bushes. Dr. Kessler looked increasingly uncomfortable. When he left, he shook my hand and said, Mrs. Whitfield, you are remarkably sharp. I smiled. I know. After he left, Kevin came into the living room looking deflated. Diane was pacing in the kitchen. I could hear her whispering into her phone. He said she is fine. Completely fine. No, there is nothing to work with. That night, for the first time since this started, I cried. Not because I was afraid, because my son had brought a stranger into my home to try to prove I was losing my mind. That is not concern. That is cruelty. The next morning, I decided it was time. I asked Kevin and Diane to sit with me at the kitchen table. I placed a cup of coffee in front of each of them. I sat down calmly with the folder Judith had prepared. I need to tell you both something, I said. Kevin shifted nervously. Diane crossed her arms. I know about the LLC, I said. I know about Greg. I know about the power of attorney. And I know about Dr. Kessler. Kevin's face went white. Diane's eyes narrowed. I also know that Greg has been investigated twice for financial fraud involving elderly clients. Diane stood up. That is not true. I opened the folder and placed the printed records on the table. And I have a full cognitive evaluation from my personal physician, conducted last week, confirming that I am perfectly competent. Kevin opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I also have notes from every conversation I overheard in this house. Every lie, every plan, every document you tried to get me to sign. I paused. And my attorney has copies of everything. The kitchen went silent. Diane recovered first. Margaret, you are misunderstanding this. We were trying to help you. I looked at her steadily. You were trying to help yourselves. Kevin's voice cracked. Mum, it is not what you think. Then tell me what it is, Kevin. Tell me why you moved into my house 3 days after someone read the letter about Helen's estate. Tell me why you brought a doctor to evaluate me without my consent. Tell me why your wife set up a company where my name does not appear. He could not answer. Diane grabbed her purse. I do not have to listen to this. Actually, I said calmly, you do, because my attorney has filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office. If you leave this house before cooperating, it becomes a criminal matter. Diane froze at the door. Kevin looked at me like he did not recognize me. Mum, you called the police on your own son. No, I said quietly. I protected myself from people who were trying to steal from me. That sentence filled the room like smoke. Diane sat back down slowly. Her face had changed. The confidence was gone. She looked small. Kevin put his head in his hands. I am so sorry, Mom. Sorry for what exactly? I asked. For the plan, for getting caught, or for thinking I was too old to notice? He looked up with tears in his eyes. For all of it. I leaned forward. Kevin, I worked for 37 years. I raised you by myself after your father died. I managed a household, a classroom, a mortgage, and grief all at once. And you thought I could not read a legal document. He had no answer. Diane spoke quietly. We are in debt, Margaret. Serious debt. Kevin lost his job 4 months ago. I have not had a commission in over a year. We are 3 months behind on rent. We were desperate. I looked at her. Desperate enough to steal from a 63-year-old woman. She did not deny it. I sat back in my chair and took a deep breath. The anger was still there, but beneath it was something heavier. Sadness. Because this was my son. The little boy who once drew me a picture of a rainbow and wrote "Best Mom" in crooked letters. The teenager who cried at his father's funeral. The man who was supposed to carry the best parts of Frank and me forward. Here is what is going to happen, I said. First, you are both going to meet with my attorney. You are going to cooperate fully. If you have broken any laws, you will face the consequences. Kevin nodded slowly. Second, the LLC is being dissolved. Greg will be reported. Diane said nothing. Third, you are moving out of my house within 2 weeks. Kevin looked up sharply. Mum, we have nowhere to go. That is your problem to solve. Not mine. His jaw tightened, but he did not argue. And Kevin, I said, my voice softening just slightly, if you want to rebuild this relationship, you need to start by being honest. Not just with me, with yourself. He wiped his eyes. I do not know how everything got this bad. It got this bad because you chose shortcuts instead of honesty. The next 2 weeks were quiet and tense. Kevin and Diane packed their things slowly. Diane barely spoke to me. Kevin tried a few times to apologize again, but each time the words felt thin and practiced. On their last morning, Kevin came to me in the garden. I was pruning my roses. He stood there for a long time before he spoke. Dad would be ashamed of me, he said. I put down the shears and looked at him. Your father would be heartbroken, but he would also tell you that every day is a chance to start over. Kevin's chin trembled. Do you think I can? I think you have to. He hugged me then. It was the first real hug he had given me in years. Not a greeting hug or a goodbye hug. A hug that said I am sorry and I am lost, and please do not give up on me. I did not say everything was okay, because it was not, but I held him and let him cry. After they left, the house was quiet again. But it was a different kind of quiet. Not lonely. Peaceful. I walked through every room and opened every window. I let the spring air fill the house. A week later, I drove up to Helen's cabin in the mountains. It was small, wooden, with a porch that overlooked a valley so green it hurt to look at. I found a box of letters inside, letters Helen had written to me over the years but never sent. 11 years of words she could not say out loud. I sat on that porch and read every single one. The last letter said, "Maggie, I left you everything because you are the only person in my life who never wanted anything from me. That is the rarest kind of love." I set the letter down and looked out at the mountains. $3.8 million. It had almost destroyed my family, but it also showed me exactly who I was surrounded by, and it showed me my own strength. I used a portion of the money to set up a scholarship fund at Ridgemont Elementary for students whose families could not afford school supplies. I named it the Frank and Helen Fund. I kept the cabin, I kept my house, I kept my garden, and I kept my dignity. Kevin called me a month later. He said he had found a job, a real one, entry level, nothing glamorous. He said Diane had moved out. He said he was seeing a therapist. I listened. I did not interrupt. When he finished, I said, "I am proud of you for trying." He cried again, but this time it sounded different, like rain after a long drought. Not fixing everything, but washing some of the dust away. I still do not fully trust him. That will take time. Maybe years, maybe forever. But I left the door open, because that is what love does. It does not forget. But it does not slam the door shut either. If you are listening to this, and you have ever felt underestimated because of your age, or betrayed by someone you trusted, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too old to fight. You are not too kind to say no. And you are not too trusting to see the truth when it is standing right in front of you. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. And that is not your failure. That is theirs. The strongest thing I ever did was not getting angry. It was sitting down at that kitchen table, opening that folder, and saying calmly, "I know everything." Because courage is not loud. Sometimes courage is a 63-year-old woman with a cup of coffee and the truth. If this story touched you, take a moment to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me what you would have done. And subscribe so you do not miss the next story. Because life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. And strength does not come from money. It comes from knowing exactly what you are worth. I finally remembered what I am worth. And I hope you never forget yours.